everyone to yet another presentation of the Monday calls. So today I'm going to be presenting on quantitative data collection methods in health research. And we are going to be looking at the methods for collecting the reliable data and valid data. So our presentation is going to follow the outline from the introduction and the purpose of these quantitative data collection methods in health research right down to the conclusions. The main purpose of this presentation is to provide an overview of quantitative data collection methods used in health research while highlighting their principles, the application strengths and limitations. Specifically, learners should understand the various quantitative data collection methods and know when applicable, and more so they should understand the construction of some of these data collection tools. Introduction. Quantitative data collection focuses on collecting and analyzing numerical data. It is also used to identify patterns, to test hypotheses, to make predictions, and to generalize findings to a wider population. Its values in health research will include informing clinical guidelines, like the importance, evaluating interventions, and supporting evidence-based decision-making. We cannot be talking about quantitative data collection methods without emphasizing a bit about data and the types of data. Now, what is data? Data is raw information expressed as numbers, values, or symbols that can be processed to generate insights. Primarily, we have two types of data. We have primary data and we also have secondary data. For primary data, this is data that has been generated by the researchers through surveys, interviews, observations, or we also have experiments. While secondary data is already existing data generated by probably literature review, large government databases. We also have patient records and files in health facilities. We have electronic health records. Like in Cameroon, we're using DHIS2. Now, what is data collection? Data collection is just the systematic gathering of information on variables of interest. It should, however, be noted that this data collection is a crucial stage in any research study. Hence, it should be done very carefully because having a bad data collection procedure, a bad data collection tool is going to jeopardize your entire research process. So for good data collection, you're supposed to ensure accurate answers to research questions. You're going to strengthen validity of the study and also enables credible interpretation of results. Now, what are the characteristics of quantitative research? Quantitative research most often involves a larger sample size. It makes use of structured and standardized tools. We are going to be seeing those tools subsequently. Data gathered through quantitative data collection method is easily measurable because it's often numeric. And most often, it uses closed-ended questions, and in few cases, we have open-ended questions, which could be both beneficial and disadvantageous. We're going to be seeing that as the presentation unfolds. Now, what are the major data collection tools used in quantitative research? We have questionnaires, we have interviews, we have checklists, that's the observational checklist, we have clinical and biometric measurements, and we also have the data extraction sheets. We're going to be looking at each of these tools independently and in details to an extent. Okay, starting strong with one of the most commonly used data collection tools that most often is used by early career researchers and students, undergraduate, postgraduate, and what have you. We have the questionnaire. So the questionnaire is a structured set of questions aligned with study objectives. For the questionnaires, we have two modes of administration. We have the self-administered questionnaires, and we also have the interview-administered questionnaires. For the self-administered questionnaires, we have the interviewer or the principal, the interviewer or the principal investigator is not directly involved. That means you give these questionnaires to the participants and they can answer it either by paper, by electronic base, using ODK, RedCap, Kobo Toolbox, or Google Form. But for interviewer administered questionnaire, we have the direct intervention of the interviewer. Yes. We are going to be looking further on the differences between the interviewer and the self-administered questionnaires. For the interviewer-administered questionnaire, we need trained interviewers to ask the questions, whereas for the self-administered questionnaires, the questions are written and presented to the participants to respond in forms, as we saw in the previous slide, they can use ODK, they can use RedCap, Kobo Toolbox, and what have you. Then for the interviewer-administered questionnaires, we mostly do this when participants cannot read, understand, and write. Like if you're dealing with the older age group, when they cannot understand, because most often we structure our questionnaires in English or in French, and sometimes these participants, when you're dealing with the older population, they might not really understand. While for the self-administered questionnaire, the study population can read, they can understand, most importantly understand, and they can write. Now, for the interviewer administered questionnaire, there is a higher quality due to interviewer control and ability to check for inconsistencies. Because of the intervention of the interviewer, he or she can ask probing questions that can make these participants to answer the questions, and is also going to reduce the rate of non-response. But for self-administered questionnaires, we have a potentially lower quality due to respondent errors or misunderstanding because the interviewer or the principal investigators are not there to further explain. And for the interview administered questionnaires, it could be done face-to-face, it could be done on phone. While for the self-administered, we can do mail or hand delivery, paper surveys, and questionnaires. Now, there are two main types of questionnaires. We have the structured questionnaires and we have the unstructured questionnaires. For the structured questionnaires, the questions and the responses are provided, and the participants just has to pick an answer. Like for example, under the structured questionnaires question 3, we have what was your first reaction to this change? And we are right here. Like, what was your first reaction to this change? We have positive, negative, mixed, and don't know. You see that the question has been given and the responses have been given, the options have been given. So the participant is supposed to answer from here. He or she is not supposed to give any other answer out of this. Whereas the unstructured questionnaire, which is also the open-ended response, here we give the participants the option to give their own idea. Like, for example, how do you feel about your job? It gives an open question for the participants to write how they feel about their job without necessarily constraining them to a particular format, like particular answers that they should give. Now, how do you construct a good questionnaire? After deciding, when you've picked your research topic, after deciding that this is the quantitative data collection tool you want to use, how do you construct this questionnaire so that you're going to collect your data appropriately? First, you are supposed to begin by having a clear definition of the data needed. You're supposed to know what you want to collect in the field. You're supposed to know who your study participants are before you are designing your questionnaire. Next, you're supposed to conduct a brief literature review to guide question development. You're supposed to go through your literature review pertaining to your topic, and this is going to guide you. You cannot just go and start developing a questionnaire blindly. You should go to previous literature as well. Then use simple and familiar languages. We should, especially in health research, we should avoid using ambiguous languages, avoid using very big medical terms. Yes, so you're supposed to ensure it is simple and the languages are familiar for the participants to have accurate results. Avoid double-barreled questions also. That's two questions in one. You're asking one participant two questions. Like, for example, you say, do you think your waiting time in the day hospital is longer? And if so, why? You're asking two questions in one. So you're not going to be able to capture what you're supposed to capture if you do this. So you should avoid double barrel questions. Also, organize questions by study objectives or themes. This is very important. If you're having 4 objectives, you should make sure that when you're constructing your questionnaire, you should follow these objectives in order to organize your questions appropriately. You should not take objective 4 and go and put in section A. Then you take objective 1 and you go and put in section D. It's going to make your questionnaire very disorganized and your work is not going to come out looking good. The next question is to avoid unnecessarily long questions. Keep your questions short, precise, simple, but do not over summarize as well. Then provide clear instructions for respondents. If you want the respondents to take one question at a time, if you want them to give multiple responses, to take multiple responses, you make sure that you provide it clearly at the top of your questionnaire, at the top of the section, so that they will know what they are expected to do. Then avoid leading questions and unexplained abbreviations. Like for unexplained abbreviations, you go and put U equals to U. For someone who has never worked in the HIV field, the person will never understand what you're talking about, U equals to U. Yes, so you should explain, you avoid unexplained abbreviations. If you're putting an abbreviation, you make sure that you explain it or give the participants hints on what it's talking about. Then avoid leading questions as well. You should ensure validity and reliability of your tool. This is a very important point. And you should also pilot test to identify unclear items. You should pilot test your instruments in a setting that is similar to the setting that you have picked for your study, but not the same. You can just take a similar setting to pilot test your instrument to be able to modify it, to tackle unclear questions, and this is going to aid in research success. The second we have interviews. These are questions that are asked orally, allowing flexibility and clarifications. We have three types. We have the structures, it's a fixed word for word, that's word and order. We have semi-structured, which can be a little bit flexible, while unstructured is purely exploratory. We leave it open, the participants express themselves and all. So the validation includes expert review and pilot testing. So if you're not very versed with this, you should ensure that you involve an expert when you're using this, and you should also pilot test. Pilot testing is very essential in research. On number 3, we have the checklist, and we're going to be talking about the observational checklist. The observational checklist is a structured tool used to record specific behaviors, steps, or observations. So we use observational checklists when we want to assess skills, and also for clinical procedure evaluation, and also used for program monitoring. It's also used for for program monitoring. So it is mostly done for when you're observing. You're necessarily not talking to the participants, you observe. So tips for a good checklist, it should be directly linked to the items, directly link these items to the objectives. You're going to notice that in most of the quantitative data collection tools that we are going to be talking about, we are emphasizing on the objectives, because if you're constructing your data collection tool, you should ensure that it follows your objectives so that you are going to be able to capture the necessary information that you need in the field. Then also use simple languages, almost the same thing we're talking about in the case of the questionnaires. You should avoid negative statements as well. You ensure binary or clear responses. That's a yes, no, done, and not done. They should keep it complete but not overloaded, like summarizing, but you should not overload, not very long. There are a few steps to consider when developing a checklist. Sorry, you define the learning objectives. This image gives us a small summary. Then you identify the observable behaviors. You choose the checklist format. You develop clear rating skills. You pilot test and refine. As we see, the pilot testing keeps coming in all of our tools. You provide space for notes and comments, and you can also consider the digital tool. Now, here is an example of what an observational checklist looks like. You can look through it again when I'll share the presentation in the group. But here is a typical example of how an observational checklist looks like. All right, we'll move to the next, which is the biometric and the clinical measurements. Here we have objective measurements that reduce subjectivity. For example, we have the anthropometric measurements. We're talking about the weight, the height, the mid-upper arm circumference, the abdominal circumference. Then we also have the clinical signs like the blood pressure, the heart rate, the oxygen saturation. And for the laboratory measures, we have fasting blood sugar, hemoglobin, as well as HIV viral load. And this, for the anthropometric measurements and the clinical science and all of this, we need required calibrated instruments and trained personnel emphasis on trained personnel, because you can still have the good instruments, but if you don't have trained personnel that understand these tools and also understand how to use them, you are eventually going to have faulty or poor results at the end. The fifth tool, we have the data extraction sheet, and it is often used for collecting secondary data, or often used to collect secondary data. So the data extraction sheet is a spreadsheet or a form used to record information from a secondary data source. So we can get this information from patient files, from facility registers, from electronic health records, and it should contain very clear variable definitions, standard units, and spaces for missing data documentation. So we mostly use data extraction sheets when we want to get secondary data. Yes. So here is an example of a data extraction sheet, taking the case of the day hospital. Like if I want to extract this information from patient files in the day hospital, I'm sure to get it because you're definitely going to have the sex of the client, the age, the date of diagnosis, the WHO stage at enrollment, the regimen, and we can also have the marital status at enrollment in the patient's files or medical records. So here is an example of how a data extraction sheet should look like. Now, after you've decided on the quantitative data collection tool that you want to use in your study, when you have chosen this particular data collection tool that is most appropriate to be used in your study, the next thing is ensuring that these data collection tools are well used in the communities or well used for data collection, and the data that comes back to you as a principal investigator is of high quality. So how do you do that? That's where we move now to ensuring data quality. The first thing you do after developing after choosing your tool and after constructing your tool is by pre-testing. You pre-test your tool during the pilot phase. You pre-test your tool in a similar setting, like your research setting, but not the same setting. So pre-testing does not mean that if I've chosen the regional hospital for my research, the regional hospital day hospital, I come back to the regional hospital day hospital again for pre-testing. That's not pre-testing. Pre-testing, you're using a different facility that is similar to your study site. Yes. So during pre-testing, it's going to help you to refine your tool, to check flow and to adjust length. You're going to see the mistakes. During pre-testing, you see the mistakes. You can find lengthy questions. You can adjust questions that have not been well understood. So that's the importance of pre-testing. So after you've pre-tested your questionnaires, the next thing now is training data collectors. You're supposed to train data collectors. The data collectors are supposed to use this tool. The data collectors are supposed to go into the field to collect this data. They are supposed to be well trained, because if they are not well trained, they will not collect your data well. You're supposed to teach them ethics. Ethics is a very important point when it comes to data collection in research. You're supposed to teach them ethics. You're supposed to emphasize on accuracy and neutrality. So you're supposed to make sure that the data collectors that are collecting this data using this tool, because you can have a good tool, but having a bad data collector is going to definitely give you problems, and it's going to end up to a bad research outcome. So training data collectors is also very essential to ensure data quality. Next is data monitoring by checking for completeness, missing values, and outliers. And I always advise that, especially when you have data collectors in the field for your research, it's good to check this data daily. Because by checking this data daily, you're going to identify the errors, the outliers, the missing values. You're going to be able to identify these things before the data collection procedure is complete. Because imagine that you don't check for these things, you just allow them to go into the field. And at the end of the day, they bring you 400 entries and you want to check you have mistakes. Are you going to go back to the field to look for those 400 clients or 400 participants to start correcting the 400 mistakes? It's going to be a whole lot of work. That's double work for you for a time you don't even have. And also resources. Then supervision. It's also good to do supervision of the whole data collection process, field reviews, spot checks. And last but not the least, you're supposed to ensure that the standard SOPs, that's the SOPs are consistent and is being followed the way it should. So these are some of the 5 most important points I came up with on ensuring data quality. However, there are still challenges in quantitative data collection and quantitative research data collection. I've listed a few here. The first challenge we have is non-response. If you have carried out research at any point undergraduate, especially from the undergraduate, when you use your questionnaires, you discover, especially when the questionnaires are administered, self-administered, you're always going to have a percentage of non-response, because if this participant does not understand, he or she will not really want to stress on that question. He or she will just skip and go to the next. That's for the self-administered questionnaires. He or she will just skip and go to the next. So at the end of the day, you discover that you have non-response questions, questions that have not been responded to. It's mostly common in self-administered questionnaires. Then we have missing data. Missing data is mostly common when you're dealing with data extraction as well, like from records, patient records, from files, from online databases. Yes, we can have cases of missing data. Then for measurement bias, that's under clinical and biometric measurements. If you don't have a standard SOP that is being followed by your data collectors, you can always have measurement bias. So it's also a challenge that is being faced in quantitative data collection methods. We also have resource constraints. Yeah. For the conclusion, choosing an appropriate data collection tool for your study is important if you want to realize a research success. And having good knowledge on the various tools, knowing when it's applicable, is also important for you as a researcher. Here are my references, and thank you for your keen attention.